The Ask the Experts Theater at CSCMP Edge 24 is sponsored by Canop.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to 2024 CSCMP's Edge Conference. We're delighted you could be here with us today. I'm really excited about our panel discussion. Our panel discussion is making wise technology decisions in a world of disruptions. And so, I'm Gary Master, President and CEO of Agile Business Media and Events with brands DC Velocity, Supply Chain Exchange Media, and CSCMP's Edge Conference Logistics. We've got a great panel today. We're going to introduce them in a second, but I wanted to tell you today's presentation is brought to you by the MHI Solutions community. The MHI Solutions community is obviously a community and a group and part of MHI that comes together to collaborate and to engage with suppliers and practitioners. The whole deal is to get people together to work together for real collaboration. That leads to when we have meetings with suppliers, with practitioners, a safe harbor environment where folks can come in and not get 300 or 400 people calling on them with sales calls. It also leads to what's called the Warehouse and DC Solutions Network, and we'll have a barcode after this presentation where you can go and you can do anonymously, if you've got a challenge in supply chain, you can scan that barcode, you can submit it, and the solutions community will call you back, someone, but it will not be sales folks, okay? Lastly, 4 companies up here. I'm with Agile, we got 3 more. We all represent the solutions community. There's over 104 members of the solutions community. There will not be a logo test afterwards, but thank you to our sponsor of the Ask the Expert Theater, Canop, who's also a member of Ask the Expert. We have some exhibitors right here that are members of the solutions community as well. Having said that, let's get to our panel. Could each of you guys just introduce yourself quickly with your name, title, and company you represent?
Yeah. So I'm Brad Perry. I work for FEEV Intralogistics Group in Louisville, Kentucky, and I'm our Director of Sales for Warehouse Solutions.
Good afternoon, Chad Hallerman, founder and CEO of Maveneer. We're a engineering consultancy and systems integrator based in Dallas, Texas.
Hey y'all, Wofford Wise. I'm out of Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm a sales director at Swisslog, focused primarily on AutoStore solutions.
Thank you guys for being here. You know, between the 3 of them and their companies, they've had hundreds of installations on the technology side. And so we've got some real talent up here. So we wanted to share some ideas. So we live in a world of disruptions, right? I mean, we do. I mean, I just looked at the phone before we got started here and saw that it looks like Israel's about to ground invade Lebanon. We've got the Ukraine, we've got war, we've got this thing called a political election. We've got lots of things going on that are disruptions. And let's not forget a port strike. Gentlemen, my first question for you is, what are some of the disruptions you're seeing? I mentioned events. What are some of the disruptions you're seeing from your customers today? What's it look like? You want to start us off and let's go down the line?
Yeah, sure. I think we're seeing much different disruption than what you talked about. Obviously, we'll feel the impacts of a lot of those things, but most of what we work with our customers on, and most of the reason why they're talking to us and wanting to automate, is because their industry has been disrupted, either because the business model has become more difficult to manage. So I focus predominantly on grocery, and if you think about what a grocer's P&L looks like, for every $1 they bring in, they keep about 3 cents of it. And their fastest growing business, e-grocery, is also their most unprofitable business. It's not margin dilutive, it's unprofitable. So that's been a fundamental disruption for them. It's how do I make this an okay business? And then, we have a lot of customers also that, as most of us here would probably say, the biggest challenge for them is labor availability. They can get somebody in, but they usually don't stay more than a couple weeks, and that's kind of a fundamental disruption that they're having to try to manage as they try to grow or continue operations.
I'll echo the labor sentiment. Labor continues to be a challenge for most of our clients as well. Finding labor, retaining labor, and it's led to new opportunities to place an emphasis on training and development. So whenever that labor does turn over, you have tools and systems in place to quickly train up the next set of labor that you can actually get in the door. I'll add, no surprise to those of you in the audience, inflation is still impactful today, both in terms of our clients' cost of goods sold, but also the cost of technology and implementing that technology. We continue to see pressure in both directions.
One of the things that we see above and beyond the labor is trying to get more out of the warehouse. It's not as simple to just move your operation. It's expensive, and trying to get more out of it, whether it's building in a denser cube or relocating equipment, trying to get more out of that same building. I mean, we've got several customers that just said, I need to get 10, 20, 30% more, and I'm maxed out. I need to bring a new line in. How do we do this? And really learning to space plan in that area. I mean, to what Wofford and Chad said, it's the labor continues. I mean, even the end users that have not had labor problems are now starting to see it. And ultimately, what does that labor cost? I mean, you said inflation, but the labor rates are running. Goods are costing more. It's a give and take, but it's continuing to run. So, the wars are not going to help anymore. Presidential elections, things like that. But really, too, just how do we get more out of this existing building?
So there's a lot of disruptors, a lot of disruptions out there today, and it can be overwhelming. I mean, we could go back to the wars, the port strikes. We could go back to having steel problems. We could go back to having, types of component problems, getting them right, parts. So with all those disruptors and disruptions going on, who should somebody turn to in supply chain that's got problems, challenges? Who should they go to? What are their options? I'm going to start on the far side and let you go first, so you're not always third.
So I think there's a lot of different ways that you can do this. Whether you go the consultant route, whether you look for integrators, whether you look for manufacturers of equipment, walking a trade show like this one really starts to help. But I don't think there's one source that you can get all your information from, but really it's a collection of information from people to say, hey, I have a problem. How do we get it? And it may not be the most obvious solution. You may say, I think I have a problem picking. But in reality, you may have a software problem. You may have a packing problem. You may have a shipping problem. And if you're not talking to people and looking at the holistic solution, then what you'll find is that you're going to implement something and you're just going to move your problem up or downstream depending on what the application is. And so really leaning on some of these experts to say, I don't know everything. I can see some really good technology, but I don't know the full solution. Lean on people, and like this MHI solutions community, lean on the people that do it every day and say, I may not know your operation exactly, but I've seen a lot of similar operations, and I know how to at least ask you the right questions to get you thinking about what your solutions should look like.
I'll echo several things that you just heard there. For a lot of folks in their supply chain careers, you may design 1, 2, 3 distribution centers in your career, maybe a manufacturing operation. The community of solutions community member companies that are out there, this is what we're doing on a weekly basis. So we're designing numerous distribution centers and manufacturing operations on any given week or month of the year. So I'll echo the sentiment you're hearing. Lean on this community. There's a lot of talent that's out there that can help you. And just know that the market is stratified. So if you're an operating team that knows exactly what you want, I think you can reach out to original equipment manufacturers. You can reach out to specific solution providers that have that within their portfolio. If you don't know what you want, or you're trying to solve a problem set that may be more ambiguous or ill-defined, reaching out to an engineering consultancy can help you. I don't think that there's a black or white answer for most people that are out there. I think there are plenty of ways that'll get you across the finish line. They're just going to look and feel different.
That was a very eloquent way of putting it, but it really is customer dependent, right? It really depends on on the experience of the people that you have and your experience with automation. And sometimes you have it in-house and sometimes you don't, and it just really depends. You can always call Swisslog. No, I'm kidding. Bad joke, that didn't land, sorry.
So let's say that we've gone a certain route. We've gone with a consultant, we've gone with a solution provider, systems integrator, a 3PL. What should really the audience here and our 100,000 folks that will view this afterwards, what should they be thinking about as they sit down with the person they've chosen to talk with? What should they have in their minds to be thinking about conceptually to guide them?
In terms of, I think it really depends on what they're trying to solve.
Agreed.
Yeah. What's their problem and what are they trying to solve, and does automation solve it, or is it something else?
Solution requires a well-defined problem statement.
Yep.
So I think it comes down to requirements and data. Understanding your requirements of the problem that you're trying to solve is going to matter a lot. See a lot of operating teams and project teams spend a lot of wasted hours finally arriving at a point where they've defined what problem they're trying to solve. So I would start with that.
And I would build off of what Chad said. Be ready to open up to the people that you're bringing in. They're going to ask about the operations. They're going to ask about the data. They're not prying to get some kind of an edge necessarily. We're asking it because if we don't understand the process and we don't understand the operation, it's going to end up in a bad solution, or it's going to end up in a solution that doesn't quite work right. And we're all trying to avoid that. We don't want to get to the end of the project and say, well, we got it 70% right, but now we learned all this other data and we can't correct it. So really, when it's time to come, just be ready to open up to it. We don't need to see behind all the curtains. You probably do things very similar to other end users. You may think it's unique, but I think the three of us could probably say we've seen a lot of it and everybody tweaks it just a little bit. It's not as unique as you might think it is.
So let's go a little bit of rapid fire here right now before we get into like some case histories and problems solved. Give us some things off the top of your mind of what some technologies are that are hot trends right now, that are real hot trends. Not things that are like 10 years from now, 5 years from now, but things that are being really effective. What are you seeing out there right now for our group here and our group watching?
So I would...
Go ahead.
So I'd say one of them that's out there is this automation of goods to person. Whether you're looking at the cubic ASRS like an AutoStore, you're looking at AMR solutions where they're bringing the pods out, maybe a gray orange, maybe a Berkshire gray, something like that. Or you're even looking at more of a box AMR, like a High Robotics, a Kaha Robotics, things like that. That's one of the big pushes that we're seeing right now is everybody that we've run into, or the majority of them, have a manual pick module, for example. And they're saying, but I have this space, I can't just demo it because I have inventory. I can't shut it down. How do we earn this space? Or I can give you a little space to the left. What can you do? I mean, those are probably the three areas that we're seeing the most right now for demand, because it's solving some of the labor problems. It's solving the cost of labor. So.
It's not uncommon to have a client come to us with an infatuation over a very specific technology, and there's a letdown period where the math and science results in a conclusion that doesn't support whatever their predisposition was. It happens more often than you would think, and I'll just say that AMRs, goods to robot, goods to person, those all have a play, they all have an application. I think it comes down to your unique set of requirements, doing the work, doing the actual math and science, and understanding the business case is going to matter a lot.
Good thoughts.
Yeah, not much to add. Goods to person automation, especially AutoStore, it's just, even with the growth that we've seen, over the last 5 years, and more broadly 10 years, like there's just still so much additional opportunity. right? I mean, we're still barely on the cusp. So I think we're just going to continue to see that iteratively over the next decade.
So there's a lot of different technologies that we could implement, and there's some ones that are hot, there's some other ones that are up and coming. All these technologies require an investment, and yet we're cash strapped in a lot of our businesses because of inflation. What are your thoughts about, and tell our audience here and those watching, what are your thoughts about how do you get a project approved? Maybe some pointers to say, how do you get a project approved? You've gone through your history and your work, and it's like, is ROI the only thing?
You want to start, Chad?
Sure. So understand the organization that you reside within. So understand your capital planning cycles, understand how your director of finance or your CFO is actually going to view a CapEx project and how they're going to make a decision. Also understand that a business case isn't just a simple productivity trade-off. There's a lot to understanding total cost of ownership and putting together a lens through not just understanding the first year of CapEx, but understanding ongoing costs, whether that's support costs, software licensing costs, spare parts, maintenance, understanding the true uptime value of whatever it is that you're investing in, and financially quantifying all of that in a holistic business case. That's going to give your team that's assembling that business case a lot more credibility when you go to the CFO or to the board of directors, whatever the decision-making framework is within your organization. It's going to give them a lot of confidence that you've done the legwork and that this is something that's trustworthy and worth investing in.
It's also, to his point, right? It's important to understand the CapEx and the OpEx that comes along with it. But on the flip side of that too, it's also to understand how it's solving your problem and how you quantify that for the organization. And for whoever your end customer is. So if you're a grocer, right? If you're getting people out, like you're getting the pickers out of your aisles and now your inventory management is better in store, consumers can come into the store and they can find whatever they're looking for. Like, how do you quantify that? But it's important you capture that in your business case. And it's all those kind of like intangible things that you have to make some assumptions sometimes to quantify, but they're really important because that's part of your business case, and that's why you need to, or that's why you're doing it in the first place.
Probably add a couple of items to those points. We've started asking the question, how much time is your HR spending on finding people? How much money are you spending on training the people that maybe it used to be once a month, now it's weekly or every other week, or you're having 80-90% of the people quit after 1 week. The other thing to consider too is the quality of life for the workers in there. I mean, if you can be ergonomic, you can be standing in an area where it's easy to heat or cool it, it's a little bit more comfortable. Can you get the retainage to stay up, and then you're not training people every week or every other week. And then the other one to consider is when people don't show up, what is it costing you to miss an order? Say you miss only a couple of %, but they can go get it from a competitor the next time. Are you factoring in that lost revenue? Are you factoring in what that's doing to your brand? And you mentioned kind of the intangibles, but I think that's one of them that really needs to be considered, that now it's not about that, I'll just fulfill it tomorrow, but it's they didn't come back the second time to buy another product from me.
Another follow-up. In terms of building credibility for a business case, we see a lot of organizations lose sight, especially early on, it kind of catches up to them after the fact, is change management. So when you're affecting change within an organization, it's important to understand who your key stakeholders are and who the adopters of this said change are actually going to be, and make sure that they're bought into the process, and ideally make sure they're a part of the design process, because they're going to have a skin in the game at that point in time and have accountability. I'm sure some of you, well, maybe not, but I know there's been plenty of times where our team has walked into a new distribution center with a new client relationship, and we see an island of automation that is no longer in use, or maybe it never went live. And a lot of people are quick to explain that, it was a design flaw, was really the crux of the issue. Change management is also a likely culprit.
Great. I appreciate you making that comment because I remember being in an MHI meeting, we were having a solutions community meeting, and somebody shared a story about a company wanted to do something, and they brought all their stakeholders to the individual first meetings, and everybody, they were so proud. They were so happy they did that. They gave the forethought. They forgot to bring IT to the table, and this thing called security. So it's so important. Thank you for bringing that up. To help us, before we open it up to Q&A, could you guys give me or give us one or two or three instances where you saw a problem, a challenge that a company had and what the solution was you saw implemented and it really helped? No company names, but types of things. Who would like to go first?
I'll go. Or go ahead.
I feel bad. I've been talking first the whole time, but sorry. Yeah, so I'll give one, and I mentioned grocery, but it's a case study. It's on our actually on our webpage. So if you have spent any time in Texas, you've probably heard of H-E-B. They're a phenomenal grocer, probably one of the best. Probably they are the best grocer in the U.S. This was before they went to Dallas, but they had like a 90% household penetration in the state of Texas before they were even the Dallas metro. So they're just a phenomenal grocer. But what we've seen in the grocery industry over the last like 5 to 7 years is the rise of e-grocery. And while we're all probably familiar with the service and we've probably interacted with in some ways, e-grocery is a really, really difficult business for grocers, right? I hinted at this earlier about how grocery is already not a great business. Like you would never get into grocery willingly because your margins are so thin. It's such a difficult business. You have tons of SKUs, half of which perish, all of them which have different temperature zones and handling requirements. It's just really, really difficult. And so on top of that, you've also got a business that is exploding. It's basically doubling every year, year over year. It's your fastest growing business, and you're losing money on every order. Even worse, you're picking it out of store because you're trying to leverage your retail space. But when you're doing that, you're alienating your consumers. And to Brad's point, if they don't have a good experience, if they're getting pushed out of the aisle by carts of somebody picking online orders, or if they can't find cilantro, because it seems like if I ever go looking for produce, the thing that's out is cilantro every time. But you're going to go somewhere else because you're just like, hey, I'm not going to go to wherever that store is anymore. I'm going to go to this one. So it's a really significant problem for grocers, kind of end to end, right? It's a problem on the P&L. It's a problem for customer satisfaction, consumer satisfaction, and the business isn't going away. It's something they have to offer. And so the use case was, hey, we've got to make this a better business, and we've got to get or minimize the presence of pickers in store. And that was the use case. It was, okay, I can pick more orders, I can pick them faster, I can use my retail space for retail, so it looks like it's a retail space. It's the way it's designed to be. It's the way that consumers have always interacted with it and how they want to interact with it. But I can still support this business. I can make this business much, much better for us in the long term.
Great. Want to go next? You want to?
So we had an apparel customer that called us out. We've had a cross-belt in their network for almost 30 years now. And they said, hey, we saw some technology that we wanted to use. So it was a vertical sorter. So think of straight line, and it's going to divert off to both ways. And so we walked with them. We said, why did you pick this piece of equipment? And they said, well, I only have this little space available, so that's what fits in there, right? So, well, I don't know. Let's think about it. It's a good piece of technology, but they were putting loose apparel on it. As it goes off the end, or you try to bring it back to where you're going to feed it, there's a high probability that it's going to start to eat the product. So think socks or a tie or something like that. And so we stood there for a little bit, gave them exactly what they wanted at first as we're getting to know them, give them a price. But what we really found out was they just hadn't thought about the space exactly right. And so at the time, they were running all 3 channels through their sorters. So they're running retail, wholesale, and e-commerce. And they were double, triple, quadruple handling specifically some of the e-commerce stuff because that's the way they've always done it, right? And why change? Well, through the process of talking to them and figuring out the design, we were able to come up with a solution for a horizontal sorter, which better handles the product. We were then able to branch off their e-com solution to another sorter that would create the orders instantly on the spot, and they could have single item orders or they could have multis, they could have a wide variety. And we were able to change this entire solution just because they started to open up to us. They started to explain what they were trying to accomplish. And in the end, the design we ended up with looked nothing like what had started. And as we did that, we're starting to open up the rest of the warehouse. So the cross belt originally sat in the middle of the building. Now we're able to build to the side. Now we're able to build back where when they get ready to do something else cool, they can start to open up the middle of the building. They can start to move workstations to get a better flow and start to reduce everything overall. And that's where what I was saying earlier about just open up, the more we got them to talk, the more we understood the full process. And even though in their head it didn't fit, when we started to lay it out, we said, you know what, it's a little bit tight right here for a few weeks as we get you transitioned over, but can you live with it being a little crowded over here until we can demo the existing sorter? And then, oh, by the way, we've opened up the entire floor to them. And so we consider that one a really big success, to just start with one solution or one idea and really convert them to a solution that bettered their entire operation.
So large Canadian retailer, think general merch, and think a product mix of 30 or 40,000 unique SKUs. And this SKU mix entails conveyable totable SKUs, so small things that either can be conveyed or fit in a tote and be conveyed, but also bulk SKUs, things that cannot, they're not very compatible with conventional automation. And Chief Supply Chain Officer comes to Maveneer and asks, I have a service problem to my retail stores. I have a network that's out of balance. So of these 30, 40,000 SKUs, we need to rebalance the network, and we can't afford to launch a new distribution center. We need to use existing assets. These are existing distribution centers with workforces in the hundreds. And how do we rebalance this network while also maintaining live operations? So we were able to put a program approach that started with strategy type work, but then led to very specific designs within 4 distribution centers across the network, which then led to specific plans. And probably the most complicated and high risk aspect of the project was, performing, what I like to call open heart surgery or open brain surgery on the distribution center. You've got to keep the building alive and operating and affect change with the least amount of disruption possible. And we were able to do this over a very long journey with this client. Took over, frankly, it took 2.5 or 3 years to do it right. But the results were SKUs that were repositioned to be closer to the stores so they could replenish those stores faster. This unlocked enterprise gross margin for the enterprise at large, and also resulted in reduced transportation costs. And we were able to accomplish all of this without any meaningful material impacts on operations, which was a very successful accomplishment for us.
Thank you for that. So gentlemen, thanks for sharing those. And we're in Ask the Expert Theater, so I'm going to open it up right now to the floor. Any questions about anything supply chain related, that is, for our panel? Any questions? Comments, thoughts? Yes. Great question. How often are we getting asked about AI? Awesome question.
So I guess I'll answer a lot. And I mean, you look at the agendas even here today, I mean, how many different sessions have something about AI in the title? The one thing I would caution about is the data is not always the best that we receive right now, and I know we want more data, and AI is supposed to help us. Really, we need to focus on the front end. It's got to be good data. If we're not improving our data capture techniques, if we're not finding ways to get it cleaned up or consistent, all it's doing is pushing the time that it takes us to scrub it down the line. And so I do believe it's important. I believe there's value there, but I would really stress to this group that make sure you know what you're capturing. Make sure the initial part of what you're capturing that you want to build off of, that you've thought through it, that it's the right data, and then build off of it. Otherwise, we're going to be combing through 10, 100 times the data that we have now, and we're still going to be back at the same questions trying to get the process started.
That resonates a lot with me. When you have a client who's talking about artificial intelligence or machine learning, but you get their SKU master and they're missing dimensions and weights on half the SKUs that are in the item master, you have to go back to fundamentals. You need good data if you're going to have any sort of intelligent software, but you have poor data, it's not going to result in where you think it is. So I appreciate the comment.
Prior to working in the automation industry, I worked in consumer goods at Unilever and Nestle, and I remember as we were setting items up to be sellable online, and you would say like, well, how much does this each weigh? And you'd be amazed, but nobody would ever know. And it really is. It's data just seems to be really difficult, and it's always the front end. It's always stuff that should be easily manageable.
I'm impressed with our clients that see. Sorry, is my mic on? I'm impressed with the clients that see through the marketing and the buzz of AI and machine learning, and they understand that the fundamentals actually matter. And at the end of the day, you're solving a real business challenge with a physical solution in the world that's enabled by digital solutions. But I appreciate the clients that can kind of see through some of the marketing.
Well, you talked about knowledge management previously, right? And that's what a lot of times if you work for a consumer goods company or possibly, I guess, in fashion or anything where you have consumer-facing stuff that you change regularly, right? You're innovating or changing the product. It's that knowledge management, right? Because you'll have a brand management team that says, like, I need to right size, like we use Vaseline, right? And so typically that means making the package smaller, taking some cost out, whatever they do. But now you have new images, you have different dimensions, you have different weights, and nobody else in the organization knows. So it's just like it's a knowledge management problem more than it is anything.
I appreciate that question too, because what we don't talk about with AI is the tremendous power consumption that's done by calculations in AI. So on Wednesday morning, for those of you that are staying around, there's an electrification report study that's coming out. We will be reporting on that on Wednesday morning. So stick around for that. Other questions? Yes. So the questions about reverse logistics, two great questions here from you guys. Reverse logistics, let's talk about that as a disruptor. And just a couple of numbers we can throw at that. $773 billion spent on reverse logistics, and you put manufacturing in it, it's over $1 trillion. Comments or thoughts on technologies or reverse logistics?
Yeah, there's a lot of technology out there that will directly address some of the reverse logistics problems, particularly if the product is conveyable or totable. So if you reflect on some of the bulk unload technology that's hitting the market, so some of the things you might have only seen in a DHL or a UPS or a FedEx, you're now seeing large retailers or .com, the Amazons of the world leveraging those same technologies. But the key is it has to be conveyable, totable. And it's also finding the right balance between automation and human interaction. So for example, if you think about, flipping a product right side up so the barcode is face up, how do you could spend millions of dollars trying to figure out how to orient the product off of a bulk unload process, or you could deploy just a handful of workers and that's their only job is, facing barcodes face up, for example. So that comes to mind.
I would say that some in the market think I don't want to spend money on it because I'm losing every time I touch it. That's probably true, but in some areas, say a fast fashion or just a seasonal fashion or seasonal product, if you can get it back into inventory faster, you have the chance to sell it again. You know, maybe you don't have to destroy it. Maybe you don't have to sit around for a year and figure it out. I mean, we're seeing a lot of push right now to say, how can I get it back into inventory faster? On top of that, for people that receive a lot of returns in January and February, we have one customer that gets 50% of all of their returns in a 4-week period. And you walk in their building and it is just piled up in front of the dock doors. Well, we got to get it off the floor. We got to get it off of that usable space. Even if we're paying for something to just store it for a little bit, maybe to get it into a cube, just get it off the floor, get it off the dock, get your refunds processed, and then bring it down in an organized manner or over into a next step. You know, think about it from that perspective. Think about it from the whole perspective that it's not just, oh, I lost $1 or $3 because I've got to touch it again. Find a way to get it back into your inventory quickly to that combination of automated versus manual and find the biggest bang for your buck there.
Last word.
That's pretty comprehensive. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, I'll say one thing. You know, I was at a conference 2 weeks ago, and there was a Wall Street firm there, and they said, when we come back next year and we talk to you as an audience, the number one thing we will be talking about is not AI, it'll be reverse logistics. It's the low-hanging fruit that we have to touch, and we have to solve it if we're going to make a better life, the world a better place. We have to solve it. We have to get better solutions for it. Let's do this. One final word for each of you to leave with our audience that's viewing and is here. One final word. Not just word, but thought.
I don't know. I wasn't prepared for this one. So let's. No, I think as companies look to automate, I think the biggest two problems that I've seen are, one, Chad put it pretty succinctly. They don't really understand what their problem is. They haven't clearly defined the problem. And then two, they don't have, even if they do, a lot of times they don't have the inputs that they need, either intra-organizationally or on the quantifiable side, to keep the project moving. But once you have those two pieces in place and you understand both those very well, that's when you can make a good decision on automation. And a lot of times it makes sense. There's a ton of use cases out there. It just depends on what your problem is.
Thanks. Chad, why don't you go next, and we're going to give you the final word. So go ahead, Chad.
So it's a good question. I appreciate the open-endedness to it. One thought I don't think gets a lot of attention, for those of you in the audience who may have a greenfield, brownfield project, whether it's a small project or a large project, I would just encourage you. I think a lot of time and effort goes into selecting your partners, but not a lot of time and effort goes into understanding your team that's being assembled with those partner companies. And in my experience, whether your partners are $1 billion+ top line revenue or medium or smaller companies, the success or failure of your large or medium CapEx projects often comes down to just 3 or 4 people, those that are involved in the design and the implementation and execution of that project. So it behooves you to get to know who are those 3 or 4 people that are going to be involved in your project, and I don't see that getting enough attention.
Brad, bring it home.
So I would say don't be afraid to ask for help, and don't be afraid to ask for help across multiple companies. Yes, it's a little bit time consuming for you to have to answer questions from 3 or 4 different solutions, and they're probably significantly different in some cases, but you'll learn a lot along the way. You may learn a lot of things that you don't want in your building, but you'll end up with a better solution at the end.
Gentlemen, thank you for sharing with us. Thank you for being here, taking the time, and I really appreciate you. Thank you.